everyone. Remember me, Clawland. Sorry I've been kind of out of the picture. Just recently moved into a new house, so everything's been discombobulated, as you can imagine. So I'm finally at a place where I have things set up enough that I can do a video review or two for you. Computer's all set back up, gaming room set up. But I did, in the meantime, do a written review of a GMT game called Bomber Command, and you can find that review on 2d6.org and grogheads.org, or grogheads.com, I forget which, I apologize for that. But anyway, today we're going to take a look at a game called Dogfight Starship Edition. Dogfight Starship Edition was originally published in 2008 and designed by a gentleman by the name of Michael P. Fox. And it's published by his company Fox Games and kind of self-published, so to speak, using the Game Crafter. It is primarily a 2 to 3 player game and is playable in anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. Now the idea behind Dogfight Starship Edition is that it's a card game, almost like a collectible card game with pre-built boosters, not random boosters. But it does use a board to add an additional tactical spatial element to the game. So we're going to take a look at that when we go over the rules. Basically, the idea in Dogfight Starship Edition is that you will have a deck of Starship cards, or a deck of cards and a flagship generally, and your opponent will have the same, and you're going to be maneuvering your flagship around the board and using cards to attack your opponent, move, launch missiles, send nukes at them, etc. And it's basically just a battle between the two of you. And it's a really interesting mix of a board and spatial element and a card game type element. So let's take a look at what you get in the box. I'll show you how to play the game, and then I'll tell you what I think about it. Dogfight Starship Edition has several variations of core sets and expansions, so when you go onto the website, make sure you read through them and make sure if it's going to be your first purchase, you're going to get a core set. This is core set 1, Heavy Ships. I know on BGG there's some videos and pictures and things of the game in its previous iterations, which may or may not apply to how it is today. So again, when you go to the Game Crafter, make sure you read through and you know exactly what you're getting, because this game has made some improvements and developed over time. So this is what you're going to get when you purchase a core set. Comes in just a standard Game Crafter black box. Open it up, and the first thing we're going to see here is very nicely colored map sheets. When you open these up, they're basically going to go right next to each other to form the game map, like so. Okay, and they are double-sided. On the other side of this one is basically just a blank hex grid if you don't want any sort of obstructions, but this side's obviously much more pretty and fun to look at. Okay, you're also going to get the rule book here. This is just printed on standard 8.5 by 11 paper, and it's looks like it's about 6 sheets, so 12 pages, front and back, full color. Okay, now you're also going to get 3 of these play mats. Again, these are just printed on paper, but there you go. You're going to get 6 10-sided dice, and these are used for tracking your capital ship's hit points or hull points, and these are a nice quality die. You're going to get 3 of these little rocket spaceship tokens. Presumably these are to be used as your capital ship moving around the map. I think these are kind of hokey, but so I kind of used some different ones, which you'll see. And you're going to get a whole host of cards. There are a little over 150 cards that you're going to get in this core set, and you're going to have to manually divide them into the 3 decks, the 3 different spaceship decks, I guess you could call them. Each one has its own capital ship. For example, this is the FAS Intrepid. So you can see that there, and then all their associated action cards. You have the USS Relentless, and of course we have the this guy here, the USPV Inferno. And so this is going to be your capital ship, and then you're going to have a whole deck of various action cards. So let me kind of set up a map, and then I'll run through the rules and let you know how it plays. So this is really the basic setup of a two-player game. We have player one here with their capital ship here and their deck of cards, and then on the other side of the table we have our opponent with their capital ship and their deck of cards, and obviously playmats in between each player. Now, the game does come with these, I think these are randomizers here, so you can draw one and it tells you where your start space is. You have A, B at the top, and then C over here. So do that. Now, the game did come with those little retro spaceship looking things, but I busted open my copy of Battlestar Galactica and grabbed a Viper and a Cylon Raider because I thought that'd be a little bit more fun and exciting. Now, to set up the game, in addition to placing your capital ships on their starting location, you're also going to add some energy to each of your ships. And the ship's energy amount is listed right here, where there is an E. And this says E10. So this is going to start with 10 energy. Now, energy counters do not come with the game, so you need to use your own. You can use glass beads, or cubes from another game or whatever. I just grabbed these cubes here from Lords of Waterdeep. So what I would do is place 10 of these on the USS Inferno. Okay? And the opponents, theirs starts with 5 energy, so they're going to place 5 energy on theirs. Okay? Then each player is going to draw a starting hand of 7 cards. And then you're going to have to determine who has priority. And priority is almost like the first player. As the priority player, you sort of have a special ability, and there's certain cards that will not take effect or you cannot use unless you are the priority player, etc., etc. So use some random way to determine priority. So now before we get into the actual game play, let me just kind of go over the different cards and things. So again, here's our capital ship, the USPV Inferno, rather. He has an attack of 4, a range of 6, and a hull strength of 27. And then the E at the top there is 10, that's that energy, and the M is its movement, so the number of hexes that it can move. Okay, so again, this game is very simplistic in the sense of how attack and range and hull work. Basically, if you were to conduct a normal successful attack, it's going to do 4 damage and take 4 hit points off of your opponent's hull. The range is 6, meaning you have to be within 6 hexes of your opponent. And once hull strength is reduced to less than 0, the capital ship explodes and that player loses. You can also see there are some special abilities that this particular ship has. And you can see that this says pay 1 counter. You may draw 1 card each time this vessel plays a move card this turn. And then there's another one that says pay 1 counter, increase this vessel's range by 1 this turn. So whenever it talks about counters, generally it's talking about those energy counters that start on the ship. There are other counters such as overheat counters and such things that cards will reference. When that happens, just use a different color counter or a different way to signify that. Okay. Now, what other types of cards do we have in the deck? Well, first type we have are the attack cards. Attack cards are red, and they are pretty much exactly what they say. They are used for attacking. And so you're going to play the card and do what it says. And for example, this is damage weapon systems. And it says attack 1 target within range. After damage calculation, if the target's hull is below 10, that vessel cannot activate attack cards the next round. So you got all sorts of different attacks and things that can happen. Some are stronger than others. Some maybe increase range but reduce the attack strength, so on and so forth. Let's see if we can't find some different cards here. Alright, so here's another type of card. This is a move card. And this is what you have to play in order to move your ship. Surprise, surprise. So this says move your vessel up to its maximum distance. So if in the case of the Inferno, its maximum move is 3, so I could then move it to 3 spaces along the map. Next we have the green cards. Green cards are your equip cards. You're going to play these and when they activate, they equip to your ship and are present for the rest of the game unless your opponent has some way to get rid of them. And this one just says, when this vessel plays an attack card with the word damage in the title, increase this vessel's attack by 2 for this card only. So again, these equipped cards can do all sorts of different things, increasing your hull, reducing damage, increasing your range. There's just a ton of different things that they can do. And finally, the last type of card that we have are the intervene cards. Intervene cards are basically any card that is not an attack or a move or an equip, and they do all sorts of different things. For example, this is how you get more energy counters. Add 2 energy counters to this vessel. And there's, again, all sorts of different intervene cards. Here's one called Reroute. And Reroute says, pay 1 energy counter from this vessel, move up to 3 cards, excluding equip and environment cards, from your discard pile to your action deck, then shuffle your deck. So, various different sorts of abilities. There's repair ones, and so on. So, there you go. There's a card. So, this is how the flow of the game is going to work. Alright, got my energy counters on the Inferno here. Let me put my deck back together. Each player is going to start by drawing 7 cards. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I didn't shuffle these, so this is probably going to be a crappy hand. You're going to look at your cards, and the person that has priority is going to start. And what they're going to do is look at their hand of cards and play their cards onto these tier levels down here. Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. That essentially means that you have 3 actions that you can take on a turn. And you're going to look at your cards. You can see I drew, like I said, a bunch of unshuffled cards here. But, and you can see these cards up here will say set. Set means you literally set the card. It's just a reminder that you set it face down on the tier in which you're going to play it. There are other cards that say discard, which means they play directly out of your hand, sort of like an instant in Magic, and similarly. And you can play it basically at any time, provided what the card text says. Okay, so for each tier, these are your choices. You can set a card down, you can draw a card from your deck, or you can pass. And you have to do it in order. I can't say, all right, well, I'm going to draw 2 cards, so I'm going to spend Tier 2 and Tier 3 to draw cards and hope I get a good card, which I'll then play in Tier 1. Can't do that. You have to play it in order. So for Tier 1, I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to draw a card. All right, Tier 2, I'm going to play a move card. In Tier 3, I'm going to play another move card. All right, so I'm going to play those. Of course, this planning is secret, and now your opponent is going to do the same thing. After that's done, you're going to resolve the tiers one at a time by player. So Tier 1 for the priority player will go first, then Tier 1 for the other player, then Tier 2, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 3, and there is possible to have additional tiers based on special cards, so you'll resolve those in the same way. So for the priority player, they chose to draw a card on Tier 1, so they do nothing now. Now for Tier 2, Tier 1 for the opponent, they'll do theirs. Now we come back to Tier 2 for the priority players. They're going to flip and reveal the card. It says evade. Move this vehicle up to its maximum distance. The maximum distance for the Inferno, remember, is 3. So I'm going to take my Inferno Viper here and go 1, 2, 3. Okay? As simple as that. And then Tier 2 for the opponent. Then 3. I reveal my 3. It's another evade. 1, 2, 3. And let's say they had done a move, so they're right there earlier, and there you go. Then after all tiers are played, you're going to discard the cards that you played. If you had played an equip card, after you reveal the equip card, it goes here in your equipment row, just to signify that that's a permanent equipped card, but other cards here just get discarded, and priority shifts to the other player, and then you start the next round. So it's important to note that there's no card draw by default. Now the priority player, as a bonus, does get the ability to draw 1 card at the end of their turn, but other than that, there's no automatic card draw. So the planning of your tiers between drawing cards and playing cards is extremely important. Also, you're kind of getting in the sense that because the planning is done in advance and done secretly, there's a little element of strategy, and luck. If anybody here has ever played Himalaya, that's what this reminds me of, is that you can have a great plan to, say, move, attack. So you move, then your opponent moves, and then you move. But your opponent had moved, and now when you go to play your attack card, they're now out of range. Because you obviously don't know exactly what they're going to do because their planning was done in secret as well as yours. So it can be very stressful to try to plan ahead of your opponent, and that's a big portion of the game, is trying to outthink your opponent. Now, one thing I didn't mention is all these numbers on the map. Those correspond to obstructions. So we have this big sun in the middle here. We have some moons and planets over here, which have various numbers. Now, what that does is that immediately limits your range to that number if that obstruction is between you and your opponent. So this is what happens. If you go to attack your opponent, you're going to draw a line from the center of the hex to the center of the hex, and if you cross anywhere over a hex with a number in it, an obstruction, you have to take that obstruction into account. In this case, there's no obstruction. Okay, let's say I was here and drawing, well, that's a bad example. Here we go, and we're drawing over. Now we are crossing over hexes that are obstructions. The second you cross over an obstructed hex, your range is reduced to that number, period. So, boom, I immediately cross this 3 hex. My range is 3, period. 1, 2, 3, they're not in range now. Same thing if, I did something like this. Okay? Here we go. Now, normally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my range is 6, they'd be in range. But again, I'm crossing over this obstruction here. My range immediately reduced to 3, so 1, 2, 3, they're out of range. It doesn't matter where that 3 occurs, as long as it is in between, it's there. Okay? And again, same with these 1s over here. Alright? If we're doing this here, we're straddling this moon, they're in the middle, my range is now 1. 1. They're out of range. And conversely, I'm out of range from them as well. So it goes both ways. So that's pretty much Dogfight Starship Edition. You're going to be playing cards, doing your planning, moving your ships around the board, attacking, and the first player, or I should say in a 2-player game, the player who reduces their opponent to less than 0 hull wins. If you are playing with 3 players, it's obviously going to be the last one standing. So before I tell you what I think about the game, I'm going to go over one thing that I really like, spoiler of course, is the card artwork. So let's look at some of the artwork on these cards. I mean, it's just awesome. It's hard to find a sci-fi themed card game, in my opinion, that has really fun, neat, original artwork. Damage, System Shock, Clear Shot, Damage, Decompression, Damage, Propulsion. And like I said, there are a ton of cards in here. I don't think there's some of the cards, such as Repair and Move, have lots of duplicates. But there's many that there's only 1 or 2 of each card. So really, I mean, there's a lot of variety of cards in this game. So what do you think of Dogfight Starship Edition? Well, there are some things that I really liked about the game, and there's some things that I'm not as keen on. So let's start with those first so we can end on a high note. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this part of it too much because this is a self-published or desktop-published game on the Game Crafter, so you're not going to have the tremendous resources that the big game companies like GMT and Rio Grande have. But, so the one thing that's a detractor is that it doesn't come with all the components that you need to play a game. You still need to find yourself some counters. You probably want to put those player mats under plexiglass or put them in some sleeve protectors, sheet protectors or something, just because they're paper, and the spaceship tokens are, they are what they are. They're functional, but it'd be really cool to have a neat little spaceship. And again, I understand that that's because of how this game is published, and that's fine. And hopefully it'll be picked up by a big company. Fantasy Flight can totally pimp it out with plastic miniatures. That's great. So, not to spend much time on that, but that's something to keep in mind when you purchase this game. Now, as far as something that's not so superficial, this game, I think, can really come down to the hand that you draw. The initial hand and subsequent hands that you draw. Maybe very similar to a game of Magic. And I haven't played Magic in a long time, but I remember back in those days, if you drew a crap hand, you know, you could really be hosed for the entire game, trying to play catch-up. And with this game, I found that sometimes you could run into that. So you would draw a crap hand of maybe move cards, and you and your opponent would move into position, and then all of a sudden you're not getting any attack cards, and your opponent's just hammering away on you. Or there's a time where maybe you're getting a bunch of attack cards but no move cards, so again, your opponent might be hammering on you and you can't move away to protect yourself. So there can be times where it's almost like a stalemate. You're just firing back and forth, and the first person who did the most damage, you know, wins. And it's kind of like, well, I feel like it was just luck of the card draw. So you have to, I think it'd be better if there's a ways to mitigate that. And what I did was you can implement a house rule, which is similar to a rule that's built into one of my favorite card games, Elemental Clash, is that if you draw a crap hand for your first hand, you can take a mulligan and draw a new hand. Another idea that we had is, since your hand limit is 10, why don't you start by drawing 10 cards in your hand and then discarding 3? So you can kind of pick, you know, your starting hand a little bit better. Okay, so those are really the two major detractors to the game. Another way to help mitigate that is to play the game in sort of a tournament fashion. So instead of just playing one-on-one, because the game goes pretty quickly, 20 minutes or so, why don't you play 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5? I think that's a great way to do it. The game also is balanced a little bit better when you have 3 players, because in a 2-player, it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Whereas in a 3-player, you kind of have to manage 2 opponents rather than just a one-on-one. So if 2 opponents are going at each other, that might give that 3rd opponent some time to limp away and let them, you know, kill each other off. But again, you got to be careful of, you know, playing favorites and that sort of thing. But hey, it's a tactical war-type game, direct conflict. So that's the whole point of the game. So just have fun with it. You know, don't take it personal. So, what did I really like about the game? Well, I love the artwork of the game. Again, like I said earlier, it's hard to find a futuristic themed game that has really cool, unique artwork, and this game does that very well. The card stock is nice. The player mats are nicer than most war games. They're kind of thick, relatively thick card stock, so you know you can't fault them for that. It's double-sided, which is great. The designer of the game has been great as far as asking questions. I know he's constantly making updates to the rule book. He's posting on the forums, so that interaction is great. He also has several expansions for the game, and I think there's also another core set, but don't quote me on that. So this game is constantly evolving and expanding, and that's a great thing when it comes to this. Also, the fact that it does come with pre-made decks, but I presume that you can make any deck that you want from the included cards. I mean, there are some rules, like you can't have a certain number of duplicates of cards, and certain cards actually have levels, which I didn't really talk about. So you have to make sure that the level of the card corresponds with, you know, the level of your ship and yada yada yada. But you can really customize this game once you you know, have played it several times. You can make your own custom deck to add even more variability. I also like how this game combines cards, which I love, and that tactical element. So you're, you know, I'd almost tend to call this more of a, it's really split between a board game and a card game, because you're playing the cards, but the cards only serve to drive the movement on the board. You still have to be within range. You still can utilize obstructions and defenses that you just can't really simulate in a card game, because card games in general do not have a spatial element that this does have. Okay? Oh, I feel like I blabbered on long enough. So overall, I think this is a fun game. I would highly recommend you check it out. I think the price is definitely right especially for all the cards that you get. And also keep in mind that there are expansions in the works, and I actually got my hands on one of them. This is the Bright Edge expansion #1. That's going to add more cards, more maps. It's going to add missions. It's got some cubes in there. That came in the box, which I'm sure, I haven't read the rules yet, so I'm sure that has to do with the missions and things. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that expands the base game. And I think this game is ripe for expansion. It's ripe for pimping games, if you're into that. So certainly if this caught your eye, I would highly suggest you give it a try. So thanks for watching.